Okay, let's get started. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out today for this workshop. We do these occasionally, just smaller sort of hands-on things that entrepreneurs need to know. Thanks, Dan, for coming to speak. I'm Amy Goggins from the MIT Enterprise Forum, as well as Ron Deaver. And I hope we'll see you at more events. You can check our website to see what's coming up. That's it. Dan, you're up.
Norm, were you going to do a quick...
Sorry.
I'll do a quick hello. Hey everyone, welcome, and thank you to MIT Enterprise Forum for having us here. My name is Norman Eng. I represent the Massachusetts Small Business Administration District Office here in Boston. Our office is located in the Federal Building at 10 Causeway. I'm a resource to you, and just wanted to say hello here today and connect with you all. It's a pretty exciting week for us next week. It's National Small Business Week, so I wanted to invite you all to come over and check out some of our events. The handouts you have at your tables talk about this virtual online conference that we're having next week that we're doing with SCORE. Check it out. You can meet people online and other resources, discover new things that you haven't learned that may help your business. Next Friday, you're all invited to our awards ceremony at Needham Sheraton. It's also co-sponsored by Boston SCORE. Come support your favorite SCORE counselors and support a good cause. So my name is Norman, norman.eng at SBA. If you need to reach me, I'm a connector, not really a counselor, but if I can be of help to any of you, please let me know. Thanks.
So since Norm opened it up, I'll tell you that we are funded by the SBA and by the University of Massachusetts to assist Massachusetts companies with and residents with creating economic value. So if Norm's unhappy, I don't get paid, so let's make sure that he's happy at the end of this. So I have been doing SBIRs for a while now, and I've been doing a number here in the Boston region. I am not a scientist, unlike many of the advisors that you'll speak with on this topic. I am science agnostic. I came to this from a background of government contracting. In my career, I sold everything from brownies for the Army's Meal Ready to Eat program to the guidance system for the Abrams tank. This became just another contract vehicle and grant vehicle, which I had become accustomed to, which is how I ended up focusing on SBIR because of the need here in Massachusetts. So the good news is that I am not singularly focused on any one science. The bad news is if I don't know your science unless you teach it to me. So it's going to be your job to make me smart if you want to get funded. That can be hard sometimes. You can ask many of my professors. So Small Business Innovation Research Program is a program for small businesses to engage in federal R&D with potential for commercialization. Let's talk commercialization. Let's focus on that. The problem with commercialization is one that has been around for a long time since the program's inception. Many of the folks who originally got involved with the program talked about commercialization, but never actually commercialized. So the government spent a great deal of money funding great research projects where white papers were written and nothing came of it. So it's now a new program that was revamped, I want to say about 7 years ago, where the focus really has become commercialization to the point where they actually ask you, how many times have you gotten SBIR funding? How many things have you commercialized? And if the answer is not an acceptable ratio, they're going to be very disappointed. They put 3.2% of the extramural budget for all agencies in excess of $100 million a year. So the program officers at all these agencies come into this knowing that they're going to take a 3.2% haircut before they start anything, and all of that goes directly to the SBIR program, and the only way that they can get that money back is for one of you to submit an SBIR successfully. First, they have to submit a topic. It has to be accepted by the SBIR office. One of you then does the research for that, and the work gets done. These are all the agencies that will be involved. Agriculture, commerce, defense, education. Anyone know the largest funder? Absolutely. Defense Department has got the largest budget in the federal government. It's very interesting when we take a look at all of this. Here's the total budget. And HHS is close, but nowhere near the same. Now, another interesting question. Anyone know who the largest funder of health and human services, pardon me, of biologic and health-related topics on an annual basis? DoD funds more in the area of life science than HHS and NSF combined. One of the things that's always interesting when I come up and do these speeches, most people don't know the answer to that, except for the guy who's studying in the back of the room that always calls me out. The one thing that happens with life science funding is at DoD, there's plenty of cash to be had, and nobody shows up to apply for it, where there may be 40 applicants for one pot of funds at HHS and NIH. You may only get 4 showing up at DoD. And they actually have to fund a lot of things that you wouldn't really expect them to fund. They fund things for, well, traumatic brain injury. We've all heard about the problems with that. We've heard a lot of problems with amputations and for prostheses. But what you also have to remember is not only are they supporting warfighters, they're also supporting the families that support the warfighters. So they do a lot of pediatric research. They do an awful lot of women's health research that you wouldn't expect, and a lot of people don't know about and don't go applying for. This is important up in this area, and I always try to make sure that we talk about VC ownership. An SBIR awardee must be had majority ownership and controlled by a single VCOC, hedge fund, or private equity firm. So you can't be fully controlled by a single private equity firm. You have to have 2 people in your in your investment rounds in order to be able to apply for SBIR. There are very specific size determination affiliations that SBA has created. And I don't try to go into them because I'm not a lawyer, but if you do have VC cash, go do your research before you start applying. It is not worth trying to get to the table only to find out that you've spent 6 weeks writing a proposal or whatever amount of time you do, because I do have clients that do it in like a day and a half. They don't usually get funded, but they do it. One thing, if I teach you nothing else today, speed kills. But if you do have VC backing, make sure you go and take a look at the SBA regulations about them. I try not to get involved because I used to do that, and I used to have 1,000 hands go up in the big rooms. And, well, I have this many people and this much venture, and they control this much of the company, and I got to the point where I was boring everybody else in the room, which I'm probably going to do anyway. I apologize now. So I want to make sure that you do take that time. These, if I give you nothing else today, are very important. These are all of the things that you, at minimum, need to register on. You're going to need to get yourself a DUNS number from Dun & Bradstreet. You have to register for the System for Award Management, grants.gov, and you need to register at sbir.gov. These are minimum. There will be other specific registrations that will be specific to the type of agency that you have to go to. There are things that I want to make sure you're clear on. These, I used to say, take about 6 weeks. If you have not registered about 6 weeks beforehand, you are very likely not to have this done in time, and you will likely not be able to apply. That was what I used to say. Now I'd say I don't know how long it can take, because about, Melody, 3 weeks ago, they found the fraud problem with Sam? Okay, we'll call it 3 weeks, maybe 4. And since that time, there has been a new regulation, and I don't really know the full impact yet because it is starting to be implemented, where in order to register for the System for Award Management, you must first submit a notarized letter outlining your authority to make application to this organization and that the information that you include therein is true. I don't know how long that's going to take. I think it kicks in 2 days is when you have to do that for both registrations and renewals. So there's a lot going on in this space. Let's consider this now 8 weeks just to be safe, because I can't guarantee you that it may not be longer. But if you take nothing else away from today, this is a very important piece of information for you. Okay, things to consider in the process. PI does not have to be a PhD. Always true. But I always tell the story of the 2 guys I used to actually do this speech on a regular basis, and there was a gentleman in the back of the room that used to always say, I say, I recommend you get a PhD. And he would always stand up and say, I have gotten 20 of these, and I only have a master's degree. All true. He was a PI on 20 of them. What he didn't outline was he had 40 PhDs that worked for him that were also on the funding. It's not that you have to have a PhD. I've had a lot of funding that has taken place in the petroleum space and in the software and programming space with people without PhDs. I can't think of any that we've had successes on in other areas, but it's the story of the two guys and the lion. They're sitting out on the savannah, and the fire's coming, and they see a lion come chasing across the other way. And the first guy just takes off. He's got his shoes off, just sitting there in his shorts, and off he goes. And he goes, dude, you got to run, run, run. You got to outrun that lion. Guy stops to tie his shoes and put them on. He says, no, I just have to outrun you. The reality is, if everybody else is bringing a PhD to the table, you don't have to have one. The rules and regs say you don't have to have one. But if everybody else is bringing one, do you want to step to the plate with 2 strikes against you or 1 strike against you? Shoot. Principal investigator. Just like it is in all of your other R&D, sorry. I apologize. If anyone's got one of these that's up here that has a question, raise your hand. Don't make it very hard. I'm not very smart.
Our business is an OEM, and I just wondered, how does the Coast Guard fit into the org chart that you showed?
Let's see. Homeland Security is not listed. Yes, here we are. Here we are. Yeah. So Coast Guard's under Homeland Security. So you would be looking there, but. That's not how I like people to go about this, is thinking that you know where to go. We'll talk about that in a bit. Remind me, if I miss this, let's talk about phase 0 before we're done today. And please, remind me, because I get on tangents and I love to talk. So, again, you don't have to be a PhD, but it's always good to remember that everybody else may be bringing one. So it's going to set the bar higher for your technology if you're not bringing to the table that which everyone else is. And again, the regs read what they read. And as I was telling Ronnie earlier, I've been published on the Federal Acquisition Regulations a few times. I consider myself a fiction writer. The reality is that there is what happens and what is legal. So it's true that you don't need one, but a lot of times, if you're not bringing someone to the table that has one, other people may be, and that'll make it harder for you. The PI must demonstrate expertise necessary to oversee the project scientifically and technically. So you may have someone that can do that, someone with a combined level of experience, even though they don't have a PhD, or they do. They may have a lot of industry experience that will be demonstrable. They may be well published, which will also lend to the credibility, and then potentially then you don't worry about that. So this is going to be the 2 things for you to consider as you're choosing your principal investigator in the process. Applications can be submitted to different agencies for similar work. This is really important for you to understand. You can't fund the same work twice, but you can fund similar work to get to the same endpoint as you are trying to do. I have one client, they've been featured in BuzzFeed and some other national publications, but before we got them to the point of getting their venture rounds, we were able to get them 3 phase 1s and 3 phase 2s for different pieces of the type of work that they were doing. None of it was duplicative work, but all of it was related work that eventually tied together into the end product. So we got about $5 million for the client before we had to go ask for venture. And so we did it by getting funding from NIH, NSF, and DoD. All of them had were interested parties and were able to get this to work. Actually, I'm not sure if the DoD, I think it might have been 2 NIHs and 1 NSF, but either way, the point is you can get this by chunking your work. If you take a look at what you're trying to accomplish logically, you might be able to get funded more than once, not for the same work, but for the same related work so that you can get to the point that you want to be in your commercialization and your development stages. Awards may not be accepted from different agencies for duplicative projects. Same thing. So there are people who do apply for the exact same work at the exact same agency or two different agencies. I've had a client who actually did this, and they got funded at both of them. So then they had to turn around to one of them and say, never mind. Now that doesn't always go so well. You have a program officer who's really excited about your science. They've just taken the time to go through the review process. They've taken you all the way to award, and all of a sudden you're saying, oops. If you go back to them for funding for something else, you suppose they're going to be interested in funding you? Well, the regulations say they will, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's true. So always make sure that you know what you're doing and make your decisions properly in the process. What do reviewers look for? They want a clear articulation of the innovation. I can't tell you how many times I've read reviews where it says, can't understand this because either A, the science is not quite as fully developed as it needed to be in order to submit, or because, and this becomes clear, the IP is clearly not protected as well as it needs to be, and the proposer does not really want to say what's going on here. And it's sort of like you've seen the cartoon where the guy's up doing a math problem on the board, and then you see over here, then a miracle happens, and then out comes a number. And that's kind of how the proposal reads. You can read it. You can tell that there's something else that's going on, but they're not willing to talk about it. So the clear articulation of the innovation is necessary, and it doesn't happen. Identify risks and indicate a mitigation plan. This is something that's always been hard for a lot of my clients. And they get points off. You need to know what happens if this doesn't work out. If your plan here seems to be logical, your hypothesis is strong, but you don't know how, what's going to happen in the end. You need to be able to say, well, this might not happen. You need to recognize it might not happen, but here's what we're going to do in case it doesn't with your money. We're not just going to throw it down a rat hole because it didn't work out. We've got another strategy. Detailed work plan and schedule, a lot of times, very important. I like to see a Gantt chart. I like to know how long it's going to take. I want to know the human resources that are going to be assigned to it. It shows two things. It shows, A, you explain to me what you're going to do with my money, so if I'm a reviewer and I know that that's worthwhile. And more importantly, it shows me that you have taken the time to really plan this out and you know where this is going to end up and how it's going to play itself out. What?
You mentioned that they take points off for some of these things. How do you know what they took points off for?
Oh, your reviews will make it clear.
So, because I applied for one and I didn't get it and I haven't seen the review, stuff like that.
How long ago did you apply?
It's for the one that we started today.
Which one?
From the Department of Education. I applied about maybe 2 months ago.
Then they should be putting comments on, in the not so distant future. You should keep checking. Yeah, I will tell you that that's got to be about the lowest success rate of any entity out there. I have had more luck funding ed plays out of NSF than I have out of ed. But I will say that we have had some successes. In fact, I've got a client that's in a phase 2 right now that we're working on some other work for. But go keep an eye on it. EdMets does send you the reviews. You can get your hands on them if you got to that point. So you should keep an eye on it and find that out. What equipment and facilities will be used? So they want to know that you have what it takes to do the job. They want to know that not only are you saying you're going to do this, if for example, you are stating that you're going to need to utilize the world's largest atom smasher to do the job, they want to make sure that on your facilities and equipment list, you either have A, the world's largest atom smasher, or B, in your budget, you have the budget to rent space or time on that piece of equipment in order to make sure that you're doing it. So this is one of the things that a lot of my clients leave to the end. It's the easiest portion of the entire piece, so most scientists say, I'll get that to the end when I don't need to. And it's the one that more often than not my clients lose points on because they didn't do a great job because they left it to the end and didn't bother to really do this when it was a chip shot 3 months earlier, and it becomes really hard when there's a time crunch. Clearly state assumptions, don't leave it to evaluators. If you, for any reason, think that you have not been clear about what you're going to be doing and what you think is going to happen, then you haven't done the job right, because these guys will come up with their own ideas, and usually they are somewhat tongue-in-cheek and sarcastic. If you're not clear about what could happen and you're not telling them what's going to go on, you're going to find out some things that they think are going to happen, and that could be difficult for you. Remember that not all reviewers are PhD experts. Explain understandably and delve into detail if needed. Sometimes you'll get some business people, some folks that may be PhDs but not in your area. So I like to come with the idea that you're writing for a PhD, but you also want a 15-year-old to be able to read it and at least be able to spit back to you what they think is going to happen. How many of you are PhDs? All right. And remember that kid that showed up late for class all the time when you were a TA, grad student? The guy that was, on the team, whatever it was, fell asleep a lot? If he can spit it back, you've done your job. Commercialization focus from the start. Again, remember what I told you about the government spending a great deal of money over the years, having great white papers that never came to anything. They don't want to see that continue. This is going to be really important. What's your differentiator? What's your competitive advantage? They want to know why it is that you are better than someone else. Sometimes that means that you can simply state how great the technology is, and because there really hasn't been a footprint in this area previously, and this is truly innovative, you don't really need to state the competitive advantage. However, sometimes you need to be very clear, outlining who is the competition, what is the competition, and why it is that your technology is that much better than theirs and is justified in getting funding because it is so much more innovative. This, when I sat on the National SBIR Conference Planning Board, was something that I got a number of DoD reviewers to give me, and it's, why don't we fund you? This probably is another one of the greatest things I'm going to teach you today, because this comes from the reviewer. Again, lack of technical detail in the plan. Remember I was telling you earlier about the guy who doesn't want to give the details because of the fact the IP is not protected or something of that nature. That is something that, again, that they will not be able to do. They don't understand what you're going to do with the money. They think that there's not enough detail. You haven't outlined the step-by-step process. All of those things are going to kill you. So lack of detail. This happens a lot. This is great. Not complying with the proposal guidelines. I have one proposer who had to withdraw 5 times for not complying. We went through all the stuff. I went through all the reviews, but when he went to put the upload, something went too far, or he used the wrong font size, or something, wasn't right, and suddenly it was about to get chucked if he didn't pull, so we had to pull. And so they have people who literally, it is their job when you submit to take a look and make sure you didn't change the font size to the wrong size, because if you did, it gets chucked. So read the regs, read the rules, it's important. And another one that's always good in this area is I just always hear that a lot of my scientists, I could have made it, I just needed to make it this much better, and I figured if we just went one more paragraph, well, that one more paragraph pushes it over the limit. You're done. This is federal contract law, federal grant law. It's not like when you handed something to your professor along the way and it was just that much better, they were happy with it. This needs to be in compliance. This is a killer. No I innovation. Small business innovation research. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes they don't see the innovation. Sometimes, as I found with one of my proposers, and of course I did tell you earlier, I am not a scientist, I am science agnostic, so I learn things from you. Somebody had created this about a year earlier, and my client was wholly unaware of it, and the reviewer basically showed them the award that was made for this exact same technology a year earlier, so that client called me up and said, I'm not going to be able to do this. I said, what happened? She said, yeah, well, apparently someone already did it. And so make sure that you know innovation, you can prove innovation, you can properly demonstrate innovation. Too ambitious. This is something that's very important. I see a lot of reviews that come back where a reviewer has looked at this and said, does this proposer understand that this is only $125,000 or $200,000, depending on what agency we're at? Don't try to do $200,000 worth of work with $100,000. They'll know it, they'll recognize it, and they'll kill you. So make sure you understand what the budget looks like, and make sure that you can demonstrate that you can do the work with the cash available. Lack of knowledge of prior work or state of the art. Again, that's got to do a bit with this no innovation, but also just not knowing what's happened. And I've had a reviewer that once came back and my client did not cite previous state of the art. And it became clear from the reviewer's comments that they were somewhat insulted that my client hadn't read their publication, because they cited what year it was published, what journal it was published in, what page it was on, and what paragraph they missed out on, and then put the paragraph in. So make sure you know what's going on in your field. You know, they're going to know. In fact, in many cases, they're the ones who are currently the industry and thought leaders, so you want to make sure that they understand it. Lack of credibility. If you just aren't bringing enough to the table, is not clearly demonstrated that you understand what's going on, you're not bringing the right people to the table, it's going to show, and they're not going to buy into it. Poorly written. You know, that's one of the things we work really hard at trying to fix, get the English grammar as best as possible, spelling properly, things of that nature. Once a reviewer sees a poorly written document, you can see the change in their tone, where you can see where I've had clients come to me where 3 or 4 different people wrote the proposal, and when it got to the point where the writing broke down, you could see where the reviewers started to get angry with the piece. And so I would go through the old proposal and say, okay, this is clearly where it can happen. So you want to make sure it's poorly written. Missed deadline. Wow. This is always my favorite. I had more clients than I can tell you that have said to me, I just needed to fix this one paragraph. I was only 5 minutes late. Again, this is federal contract and grant law. Late is late. It's not like, you know, when you're submitting to your PhD professor or your school, which usually says, fine, no problem. You know, 5 minutes late, no big deal. If it's not in on time, it's not in on time. Most people wait until the last minute, the worst thing they can possibly do, because there's problems with submissions, some registration didn't go through, and they find out at the last minute. The server goes down because every PhD who's just trying to get that one more paragraph fit in there and right is there at the last minute, and it turns out to be basically denial of service because there were so many people trying to get in. Don't wait till the last minute. Don't miss the deadline. Not responsive topic. This is good. A lot of guys and reviewers get very angry when there's something that's close to what we asked for, but not quite. You know, we asked for X, and this is not quite there. It's, you know, something that clearly was something that the proposer was interested in doing, but wasn't necessarily what we were looking for. So don't try to put a square peg in a round hole. They'll catch it and they'll kill it. Again, the commercialization, lack inadequate phase 2 or phase 3 potential. If you can't move on with your phase 1, then in all likelihood they're not going to fund phase 2 or phase 3. So you want to make sure that you can demonstrate from the beginning that this has potential commercially and that there are more steps to be taken in it. Where do you get info? SBIR.gov. Can do your searching. Now this is the phase 0 I told you I wanted to talk about. Everybody tends to understand, like I said, that HHS and NSF, or NIH and NSF fund life science stuff, but most people don't know about the DoD funding. What I like to do, and this website is no longer being maintained, so you don't get the same level of detail that you did at one point. So I guess I should probably take this down. But I still have it there in case you're looking for. This has a much better search engine capability, but you only get the first 2 paragraphs. But you will get the topic number, which will allow you to then search here and get more detail on what you're looking for, which is the only reason I leave it up here. But what I would like to have people do is search for closed topics, not open topics. You go to open topics, and you find out what's available now and what you've got 6 weeks to apply for. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to go after it if that's what you really want to do, but I like to have my clients talk to the program officers and to the people at the agency prior to going through the process. I had one client come to me, and he'd submitted 4 proposals before he knocked on my door. All of them rejected. I read the proposals, and they weren't bad. In fact, he was within the fundable range. A couple more points, he could have gotten funded. He just never got funded. And so I looked at it, and I read the proposal, and I thought it was pretty good. And I thought that the reviews weren't terrible. So I said, did you talk with the program officer tell you when you talked to me? And I haven't talked to him. Well, call up, find out. Program officer said, I'll be honest with you, I'm never going to fund this. I don't fund platform technologies. Talk to so-and-so over here. He funds platform technologies. You give me your initial indication for this, and I'm in. You give me an initial indication, and I'd be very interested in funding this. But until that time, talk to this guy. He funds platform technologies. So sure enough, we talked to the guy that funds platform technologies, says, come in under this topic. We write for that topic, and we got funded. So if the guy had done the research here and found out about closed topics and talked to that program officer, he would have saved himself 4 proposals that didn't get funded because he would have talked to the guy that said, talk to this guy. He funds what you're doing. So it's nice to talk to these people up front and understand what they do. And that's why I try to get everybody to do this phase 0 research. And I'll walk you through it in more detail at another point. But these 2 websites are really where you want to go to find out about who's funding what and how to get in touch. We at our office not only work with people to do SBIRs, but I kind of put together what folks in this area come to us for most often. Entity formation. If you're sitting on your bench and you're trying to spin out of a lab right now, you haven't quite figured out you want to be an LLC, an S Corp, a C Corp, we have people to assist you with that process. We have people who will give you the pros and cons of each and the ideas for it. We help with commercialization plans and business plans, which you're going to need for a number of these SBIRs. So we have people who specialize in working with you to identify how you would have access to market. We do a lot of pitch deck reviews. I'm rather proud. Our most recent success was a $3 million investment here in Cambridge that is working out fairly well. We do a number of these on a regular basis. Work with marketing strategies. We have people, when you do get to the point of needing financing, debt financing, we have people to do that with us. And we have low-cost training sessions or free, like we do here today, to try and teach you about the things that you may be interested in. So how do we get involved? This is the website for our organization for the SBIR program. If you go to this website, fill out the form that's there, you will then be sent a more detailed form to fill out, which will require and provide you with confidentiality so that we can have a good, detailed conversation about your science and what are your goals, and see how we can fit in to try and help you with the process. So on that, oops, now I've done it.
Is there more slides?
No.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Well, I wanted to put that back, last one up.
To a certain slide.
Last one. Or the first one. Either is fine. So again, there's my email address, there's the website, and this is really the most important website for you. If you fill that out, it will automatically generate the form that's necessary so that we can go through and get the confidentiality agreement in place so we can talk more clearly. Now this is the part where you guys pummel me with questions, and hopefully I don't mess them up.
Yes. If I could publicly.
Absolutely. And I got nothing to hide on those. You could, you don't have to. If you are a Massachusetts resident and the LLC's in Mass, there's no reason why we can't work with you. But you can also go to California. I don't know who depending on the area, et cetera, I don't know who they have out there.
The LLC was founded in California.
That I think is okay if you are a Massachusetts resident.
Really? Okay.
I'll have to take a look at the actual rules on it, but I think it's no problem.
Does it matter where you apply? If your project is in oil and gas and you apply in Massachusetts, does it change anything?
If you're, ask that to me one more time. I misunderstood the.
If your project, is about oil and gas, so stuff in Texas, and you apply in Massachusetts, does it change anything?
No. This is a federal program, so it's irrelevant to whom you are applying, except in that each of these agencies has a different way that you would approach writing it. For example, HHS and NSF like to bring their reviewers in from academia and from industry, which means that they're not part of the agency, which means that they don't necessarily have any allegiance to agency mission. So they bring in their own biases and their own history. So you would write differently to NSF and HHS as DOD, where DOD brings in their own staff to whom these reviewers answer directly to the program manager. So you can count on them being true to agency mission. So it's a different mindset in how you write to each of these agencies, but it doesn't matter, where you're from to write it.
You probably said this, but can you summarize what the mission is of the program?
It is to engage small businesses in federal R&D with potential for commercialization.
Is that just in research, or is it in product development?
Well, small business innovation research pretty much says that yes, it's research, but that is research into the area of building a commercializable product. So the answer to your question really is dependent upon what your approach is. I had a client come to me at one point that had a product in mind that basically they needed cash to develop. I told them that this would not be possible until they changed their mindset and showed the value of the product, a research program showing the value of the product, which would then allow them to use funding in phase 2 to create the prototype for this product after its value and its potential was established. So it's not something you can't do. I do develop prototypes for clients, with clients on a regular basis, but it's not prototyping cash. It's research cash. It's important to understand you cannot use R&D dollars for test and evaluation purposes. If you're doing true research into optimizing a prototype, that can work, but you cannot just test something and iterate it. It's not small business iterative research, it's innovative research, and it's research. So remember that as you go through the process. So can you develop products and prototypes out of it? Yes, but it's got to be focused on a research project. And you'll understand when you talk a little bit and you take a look at those websites I gave you, at what they do fund versus what you're trying to accomplish. And it's a matter of beauty's in the eye of the beholder at that point. You need to make sure that you're talking to the program officer and see what they think. They may tell you, no way. They may tell you, here's what I'd like to see you do with that. There are ways to find that out, but it is not, by definition, a product development funding.
Where's the best place to start? Just talking about the idea with you or with Norm?
I think Norm's a great guy. But I am happy to do what we can to have a conversation about it. And I will. I'll apologize now. I'll be completely blunt with you. If I don't think it's going to work, I'll tell you. I've got a reputation for that, unfortunately.
What's your
Dan's the chair counselor. We'll sit with you one-on-one and walk you through the entire process, but we like to see people participate. I'm more of a connector. I'm a government guy, where he's not really as, red tape as I am. So I just try and sort of direct you to the right resource. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but so my takeaway from this is you start with Dan, get some ideas, present, he'll say, yeah, this is good, then talk to getting some more research.
However you'd want to do it. I mean, the bottom line is if there's something there, I'll let you know. If there's not, I'll let you know that too. If this program can work for you, I can give you some ideas of how you can approach people for it. If this program can't work, I'll put you in touch with the rest of the folks within our organization. Won't make the mistake of going to the last one again. That can help you with this kind of work. So we will take a look at what it is that you're proposing. If it doesn't work within my realm, I'll see if we can find someone that can.
I've got two questions here from the live stream. And the first one here is, what are the restrictions for foreign nationals?
This is for U.S. citizens and green card holders. You can have a PI that is a foreign national if you get approval from the agency, but the company needs to be owned and controlled by U.S. citizens. So it's the same definitions of a small business as it stands for all small businesses with SBA.
And the second question is, do you need to protect your IP before an SBIR submission?
Great question. The answer is no, but I wouldn't feel comfortable having you go in. Again, there's the regulations and there's the realities. So it's completely fine and it's right to go in without IP protection. But my grandfather always taught me that here lies the body of Michael O'Day, who died maintaining the right of way. He was right as he sped along, but now he's as dead as if he was wrong. So you can do this without IP protection, but understand your competitors may be reviewing this. And although they have a non-disclosure agreement, you can't unsee things. I used to do a pitch fairly regularly with Jesse Ehrlich, who passed away unexpectedly a few years ago. And he was the IP attorney for the Air Force. I used to love having him. Anytime I did one of these pitches, I'd make sure he came up afterwards because he'd talk about the parts of this that I'm not smart enough to. And he would scare the hell out of everybody because he'd tell them, if you don't protect it, I'll try to take it. Now, that probably wasn't necessarily always the truth, but he did always make it clear that it's best to have it protected before you come in for two reasons. One was, and this is a complete oversimplification, and I am not an attorney, just to be clear, so save your tomatoes for later. The two reasons to be protected is one, that you want to make sure that if this does get read by someone who's your competition, that is covered and you do have freedom to operate and you do know all of the things that you are talking about are covered and are protected. But more importantly, in the SBIR process, the government funding, for which they do have a royalty-free right if they choose to exercise it at some point, which I don't think they've ever done, but I don't know for certain. I can't think of any situations, but they only have the right to the incremental innovation that happens with their funding. So if it is documented that what you have going into the funding is yours, then they only have right to that which is developed with your funding. So if you're adding functionality to an existing technology, you can protect it and you can make sure that you have full ownership of that which is yours going into it by having the IP protected prior to entry. Again, I'm not an IP attorney. There's about a billion other things that I'm sure I'm supposed to say here, but I don't know how to.
Yeah, I have a question about topics. I'm not seeing them on the list. Have you had any success with clients suggesting them and seeing them picked up down the road?
If you take a look at the SOCOM website, the Special Operations Command website, I think it's the only one that still has the nerve to go up there and state, if you have a topic, submit it to us. It's interesting, apparently they've got all the best weapons, so they have the nerve to go do these things. Yes, you can work with a program officer to have a topic submitted. You should go out there and always, which is the reason I tell you, go talk to the program officials beforehand, see if they're interested, because again, if we'd gone out and looked for it and talked to the guy who didn't do platform technologies, he would have told us to go to this other guy who might have a topic we can fit in. And a lot of times you might not see something that logically fits, but the program officer can find a way to point you to something that while you don't think it fits, they think it fits, and they can make it work within the topics that already exist, depending on the agency. Some agencies, more so than others, I've had clients write their own topic, submit it, and then respond to it later. So it all depends. You can have that happen. You know, it does happen where you work with the program office to show them a technology that they should be interested in, because remember, this is innovation. This is something that they've never ever heard of. So somebody could have cold fusion, you know, in their lab and have you know, the next best thing. If the government doesn't know it exists, they can't ask for it as a topic. So you need to be talking to the program officers beforehand to make sure that you can show what you're doing, demonstrate the opportunity for innovation if funding is applied to it, so that you can have a topic for it. Because, you know, a few years ago, you know, if we look back when SBIR was created, you know, cell phones were a completely different animal. Qualcomm is one of the companies that was an SBIR funded company that ended up coming up with a lot of what we now use in cell phones. Did they have that topic when they started? Probably not. So it's a matter of, you know, you need to make sure that these guys know what you can do, because you can't have a topic if no one knows it's out there.
Dan, the handouts talk about SBIC. What's the relationship between SBIC and SBIR?
I have no clue. I haven't seen that handout. I apologize. I'll have to take a look at that one and make sure I understand which one it is. That's Norm's piece. Broad agency announcement. Yeah, broad agency announcements they're a lot of things. One thing that they are is they're basically invitations for people to give ideas that are similar to SBIR topics, that don't have the funding restrictions associated with SBIRs. So, you know, they may have a funding limit. You know, it's not a phased program. It's just a BAA for someone to do topic X, and there's $7 million that's available for that. So we don't have to worry about phase 1. We don't have to worry about phase 2. There's just $7 million, and we're going to fund good ideas in this area. But it's also used at times just to learn what they don't know, kind of like what Melody just talked about knowing topics. Sometimes the government uses it to find out what they don't know. They'll put out a BAA and just say, we're looking for innovative topics in the area of X. We'll call it cell phones. And a bunch of people come in and they write all these great ideas about what they can do for cell phones, and the government says, great, these are great ideas. So then they write another BAA that's got all of the best ideas all rolled into one, and that's the actual thing that they fund. So that someone has to meet all of these great ideas in order to get funding for the next piece. So it's used a bunch of different ways. It's always important to have conversations with the program team beforehand before you apply to them. But I don't, you know, you need to talk to the agency in order to understand what the BAA really is. That fair? Is that? There will at least be points of contact listed on the BAA.
How does this work with, like, DARPA?
DARPA is one of the agencies that funds SBIR. It's a portion of DoD, so they have SBIRs just like other things, but they also do other types of research that are not limited to the SBIR funding structure.
At what stage at this moment you apply? Can you apply to like a brand new startup, or do they most of the funds been around for a couple of years?
I have taken people from you know, postdoc to corporation, you know, to people who are 30-year-old companies that have hired a new researcher to do R&D for their company. and they're trying to do new product development in their area. So it does not matter your level of experience, but you'll need to make sure that you can demonstrate the things that I outlined in this piece.
Talk a little bit about the relationship that you have with your customers.
Well, they hate me until they get money. And no, we work together fairly regularly. I coach through the process of how do I find cash. I review any of the documents that they use to communicate with the program officers. We talk strategy on how to move forward. I review their proposals. I then, if they get rejected or they get funded, I take a look at their reviews to see how we can improve. Then we go so far as to go on for other funding, pitch, I'll review the pitch deck with them. It's all a matter of what the need is and where the relationship is going. It's driven by A, success, and B, the client relationship and how much need the client has. We have a small team within our organization. It's growing, but it's small. So it is dependent upon the client doing the majority of the work and us just reviewing it and giving guidance. And we hope that it's good. And we do have a fairly decent success rate. I do. I'm fairly content to say that we're probably at least double the average success rate of a non-coached SBIR proposer. But I haven't really run the numbers. But there are clients for whom I am never. What I can tell you is, I can't tell you what's going to be a winning proposal, but I am 100% on picking out what's going to lose. No one has ever proposed or sent something in that I said is going to lose and gotten any money.
Is this pure grant money or is it investment involved?
SBIR program is both grants and contracts. It is dependent on the agency. It is a non-equity investment in your company, but it is for production. But the government does retain a royalty-free right should they need to utilize the technology for its purposes. Again, as I've said, I am not aware of them having exercised that right since 1992, but there may be one or two cases that I don't know about. I'll go out to the SBIR conference next week and find out if it's happened, but it's, to be fair, I don't know of anybody that it's happened to.
I was looking at the NIH SBIR program, and they've got grants and contracts.
Correct.
You knew the ins and outs on the difference between some of the differences between the two.
Yes. A grant says we plan to. A contract says you will. How's that? Nice and simple.
Can you go into the specificities of each government agency, like DOE, how you apply?
No. Not in this forum. Can we work on that together at some point? Yes, but to go through those nuances right now, we don't have enough time, and B, I'm not really sure that I could do it without asking you as many questions as you'd have for me.
What is the typical response time, 3 months once it comes out?
I've had a client that took a year and a half to get their funding. Typical response, 3 to 4, depending, but it depends on the agency. But like I said, I never tell my clients what kind of time frame they're looking at, because you get that outlier, and I had a client that was literally hanging on the line for a year and a half because of a million different changes going on. They got notice of award, but they didn't get cash for a year and a half. I like to say 6 months just to be safe, but that's not usually the case. Anyone else? All right, tomatoes time. Well, thank you very much.